Hey guys, my name is Daniel from Lyft. This is probably my 5th advanced AWS meetup, so I figured we'd host. It's great to see everyone, and I love talking to Peter about all the AWS stuff and everyone that comes to the meetup. It's pretty cool seeing everyone working on some of the more bleeding edge AWS technologies, especially Docker. So Lyft is hiring. I am a DevOps engineer, but that doesn't mean I only work on writing Bash. Do a lot of configuration management, but we also do a lot of really advanced architecture projects. It may seem like a simple app, but there are a ton of challenges. So these are some of the different roles we have available. We're always looking for new engineers, people who are excited about the product and excited about Lyft. And we have a pretty cool stack going. So if you're interested in talking to me about it or learning about any of the opportunities here at Lyft, I'd love to talk to you and love to share some knowledge with you, even if you just want to talk about Docker. It's funny because we're using Docker in dev for all of our dev environments and for our CI. And Peter said that wasn't, we need to be using it in production to meet the bar for this meetup. So you guys should be getting some pretty interesting talks tonight. But again, my name is Daniel, and yeah, if you have any questions, just come up and talk to me. Thanks.
Thank you, Luke. Yeah, so I started asking around a couple months ago for speakers to talk about Docker in production at scale on AWS, and let us know how you figured out your monitoring, your networking, auto-scaling, like all these great things. And I think we've found some awesome speakers to come and tell us about that. So first up is Bridget from DramaFever.
Thank you, Peter. Uh-oh.
Oh, that's mine.
That's mine.
We're going to do this and see if we have a presentation.
That's mine.
Excellent. It worked in test and it's working in production. All right. So yes, when Peter reached out, I think Brandon Burton told you to check out that sysadmin blog post, I think. Yeah, so I committed a blog post for sysadmin and talked about what we're doing at DramaFever with Docker in production. And it's kind of funny, actually. I didn't make it to I went to a couple of different DevOps days last year, and I never made it to any of the Docker-related open spaces. And then I heard afterwards that it was a whole room full of people who weren't actually using Docker. I'm like, oh man, shit, I should have gone. But anyway, who am I? Why am I here in San Francisco talking to you? My name is Bridget Kromhout. Like I said, I'm actually based out of Minneapolis. I remote to a company called DramaFever. We're kind of like Netflix, but for Korean soap opera, as one does. Let's see, you may also know me from Arrested DevOps. I recently started co-hosting that podcast. Sorry guys, they're actually taping one right now without me. Through the magic of time zones, I thought I'd be able to do it. I was like, no, wait, I'm gonna be in Pacific time, shit. Help run DevOps Days Minneapolis and DevOps Days core team stuff and what have you. So yeah, that kind of tells you a little bit about me. And I'm in ops. To give you an idea of how long I've been doing this, I definitely spent time with containers with FreeBSD, Church jails and Solaris zones, and have nostalgia for Sun OS 413. So anyway, at DramaFever, we've been around for about 5 years, and we've actually been running Docker in production since October 2013. Since I'm pretty sure the main thing on the Docker website at that point was giant letters saying, do not run this in production, which did not dissuade my boss, Tim. I actually joined the Docker in production already in progress last July. And I'm not gonna lie, that was one of the inducements, right? I was looking around, the startup I was at had been acquired, I was looking around for something really interesting and fun, and Docker in production, and a whole bunch of Go microservices. I was like, tell me more. And so yeah, it's actually pretty fun. And I think everybody has different reasons for why they want to use Docker. I would assume most people's reasons aren't Markov chain generator on the front page of Hacker News or something, but I mean, maybe. Everybody makes their important technology decisions that way, right? But for us, I mean, it's two big things, right? It's that everybody who's developing something is able to develop in a completely consistent environment that is exactly like everyone else's, which you can do with other tools. And I'll talk a little bit about what we were doing before in the pre-Docker era. But then the other thing that it's really useful for us is like entirely repeatable deployments, because it's not possible for some but not all of the code to make it out to prod, which I've definitely worked places before where that was a thing that could happen. So this is, the plural of anecdote is not data, and a bunch of slides do not make a tutorial, so this is not one. There is more detail in the blog post, which I will link from my website and whatnot afterwards. But this is more, I think what Peter said, he liked the idea of some of the stuff I was talking about in that blog post, was he said, this sounds pretty repeatable. And I was like, yeah, probably, because even though we're doing stuff that not everyone is necessarily doing, I think everyone could be doing. So none of it is, super special, secret, whatever. If you want to run a private registry, and you probably do, because you're going to be building your images that have your stuff in them, and you probably don't want to put them out on Docker Hub or whatever. The official party line on private registries is that you can use, and we get to the peripheral AWS related stuff here, is you can set S3 as a storage engine option. But the stuff that's recommended at least is set this all up on a central registry server. Apparently, and I'm told this is before I joined DramaFever, but I'm told they actually tried that. And it worked okay until like 20 or 30 or 40 machines were all hitting it at once, and then it kind of melted down. And so, my coworker Paul and my boss Tim went back to the drawing board and wanted to figure out how can we actually make this scale. And yeah, they could have, put up together a cluster of these and blah, 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 but that didn't seem to make as much sense as distributing it a lot more. So we actually run a private registry locally on every instance that's going to use Docker. And you can feel free to take pictures of slides and tweet pictures of slides. There's a picture of a cat later. These I know are not the most exciting slides, or maybe they are the most exciting slides if we're trying to figure out exactly how to do this. But I will put the slides up on my website afterwards. But anyway, so if you're security minded, like my friend Megan sitting right there videotaping is a security engineer at Yelp, and they're probably hiring. You're hiring, right? And so are we. There'll be a pitch about that later. But you're probably saying, insecure registries, why? Well, okay, so there probably is a way to get your local registry to care about SSL, but honestly, if we're being man in the middle on the instances themselves, we have bigger problems than exactly the security of talking to, the Docker zero. So we don't spend a lot of time worrying about that. The other thing that's sort of important in here is when you're working in EC2, you're probably not having / be enormous, and so you probably don't want your Docker root there, because when you pull down all sorts of images and then start up all sorts of containers, your disk will fill up. And very, very bad things happen, as it turns out, when your Docker root fills up. I have actually, sidebar, there will be many sidebars, possibly. I've actually had, and it was on a graphite server of all things, or one of the graphite servers. The disk filled up, containers stopped working properly at all. I was trying to figure out why, and I started the container interactively with like bin bash. And I'm like, ls, and it works. And then I'm looking around, and a few minutes later I type ls again, and it's like, command not found. Like, how is this possible? So bizarre on-disk corruption is what I learned from that, if you actually let your Docker root fill up. So since you have /mnt, you're in AWS, you may as well just throw your Docker root in some place that's much, much bigger, so that you don't have to worry about that. So, and then the other thing to consider is that because it does expect, it expects a host name, but if you're using anything after 1.3, you can't use 127.0.0.1 locally. You're going to have to drop something, if you're using, say, boot to Docker on a Mac, you're going to have to drop something in your etc host to overwrite what you've put in DNS for localhost. If, again, you're going to be trying to use this in local development and also in your production servers in EC2. So let's see. We're using Upstart. Not gonna get into the systemd wars here. I know it's both a floor wax and a dessert topping. And honestly, I run FreeBSD at home. I run Linux when people pay me to, so I have no opinion on systemd. But we use Upstart because, sure, gotta use something. We actually have a public registry image. We don't use the official one, like, right out of Docker's, here's the official registry image. Because one time last June, they pushed a broken one without changing the tag. And that is not awesome if all your stuff suddenly breaks and you're like, how did nothing change? Well, something did change. And so after that point, it was like, grab one that works and put it someplace it will, well, immutable is a myth, but it's at least probably not gonna change. Probably fine. But anyway, so then we also, port 5000 is just the recommended port. I guess you could use anything. I don't think it really matters. And the config.yaml is probably the other interesting thing here. This is an incomplete version. I just pulled out the semi-interesting parts of it because since we're doing an S3 back local registry, and I left out the storage engine S3 or whatever, but since we're doing an S3 back local registry, you do need to drop some Amazon credentials in here. Again, you're not only using this from inside EC2, because you're going to be like, dropping Amazon credentials anywhere is bad, and that's why we have, host, IAM roles. Yeah, but if you're running boot to Docker on your Mac, you got to have something. So again, you don't have to have the credentials in your code, but at least your devs are going to need to set their credentials such that you can use this. And just has to have access to S3. And then you're thinking to yourself, but wait, isn't Docker barely 1.0 and horribly buggy and everything is scary and terrible? Well, yes, obviously, those kind of things are gonna happen. Probably the most entertaining recent one, and this is actually not in the blog post that I wrote for sysadmin because it just started happening, yay, which is, there's apparently a bug in the Docker registry that they're in the process of rewriting anyway and replacing the Python one with a Go one, which is excellent and everyone applauds it. But it does mean that there's some bugs that are just not going to get fixed until they get to the next version, and it's the Go one. So one thing that we ran into is that if we were pulling down large images with a lot of layers, sometimes from S3, it would sometimes just stop working. And this is bad because we have instances auto-scaling up and needing to pull their container that they need from S3 so that they can start. So we end up with our CloudWatch alarms going crazy and telling us that we have unhealthy hosts, and it's just not good. Fortunately, the Docker project is full of wonderful people who work for Docker and don't, and there's a perfectly reasonable workaround that I've highlighted in yellow. And you'll have to go look at the, you can go look at the open issue in the Docker registry repo to see exactly what's going on with that. But the TLDR is, this tells it to just go directly to S3 to get that, as opposed to passing through the Docker registry. So that was some 4 a.m. Googling because I was really sick of being paged. But, okay, so we've got a private Docker registry. Excellent. These are, by the way, there was some website that had pictures, because I was like, I need pictures of containers, but I don't really want that. I don't really want that picture that you always see in presentations now of the containers that fell off a container ship and they're in the boat the pirates are carrying. It's like, I don't really want that. I want something different. So I went with the containers that have been totally repurposed and are a little bit different. So next up, build pipeline, because I promised I would talk about what we do for development. This is actually relevant both to local development and production, right? Because we have all of our containers being built by Jenkins. And that doesn't mean that we don't distribute the Docker files. I mean, the Docker files are there, they're in the source code. The devs can certainly Docker build to their heart's content. We don't actually let anyone except Jenkins, even our own credentials. We only let some credentials that are on Jenkins Docker push to the bucket that we keep the official, canonical images in. Just because, as my boss put it, he was like, this is to prevent me from being drunk at 4 in the morning and Docker pushing something bad to prod. Yeah. You gotta protect yourself in these things. So one thing that we do to speed up, because we're doing, like we do trunk-based development, and we build like at every push to master or 2 minutes, whichever one is longer, after there's been a build, or after there's been a commit. So we don't want to be building like the entire, base with all of the dependencies every few minutes. That would just take too long and be ridiculous. This is actually, even as of today, this is going to change a little bit more because we're splitting out the integration test, and that's going to be another build that runs like every day instead of every time. But for now, the less frequently, the infrequently changing dependencies, we just build the base build every day or every week, and then are able to just use the like dub. This is again for our main. And I think monolithic is such a terrible sounding word, but we do have a main Python Django app, and then a whole bunch of split out Go microservices. So that's how we get developers to join, right? Like, you can spend a whole bunch of your time writing Go, and you also have Django. But anyway, so we do build the base image for the Python, the Django, just because it speeds it up, makes it faster. And then in the, again, it's like, yes, I'm in ops, which means the sad thing that they don't tell you is that you will write a lot of bash, and you will write a lot of make files. And so yes, we have make files, and Jenkins calls them. And some of the stuff Jenkins calls is gonna run these, basically, like, this is a very small excerpt of the stuff it's running, but the general idea is build a container, run tests in the container. If the container passes, then tag it as dev and push it. If it's not going to pass all the tests, then we don't want that being out, even as the new master build. And device mapper bugs. Everybody here who's using Docker, what are your opinion of device mapper bugs? Nobody has horror. Yeah, I see some thumbs down. So we got really tired of the build breaking for no apparent reason. It was actually kind of funny. So I joined in July, and it was impressed upon me that we did not leave the build broken. Breaking the build was a thing that a person should drop what they're doing and fix what they did. And then the build's breaking, and I'm like, let's jump into action and fix what? Oh, it's just Docker having race conditions and device mapper bugs and stupid, horribleness. And we went down a whole rabbit hole of like, if you switch to AWS and everything is better, but not really. Like, yeah, I see. What was your name?
Daniel.
I see Daniel up there going, yeah, there's no cure for it really. Other than, the exciting future where all of us, everybody here is gonna go home and like, write some Go and contribute to the project, right? That's the plan. Later tonight, go fix all my device mapper bugs. But until then, we would get builds breaking like this. And that's annoying enough if you're sitting there in the middle of the day and you're hoping all the tests pass and you really wanna, I don't know, promote that build to QA or something. It's much, much worse when it's your base build and it's running at 4 in the morning, and then you come in the morning and your base build's broken. So, thanks Jenkins, lots of plugins. The Naginator plugin, Naginator? I don't know. I'm not sure, I'm never even sure if I'm pronouncing Nagios right, but the Naginator plugin will retry builds if they've failed with a certain regular expression present. Like Yahtzee, this is what we need. So, this is actually slightly out of date. I made this for a meetup where I was just giving like a lightning talk about Jenkins, and I didn't get around to going and screen capping like the new one, but there's a couple more things in there now, and I think I limited, instead of an error getting container init rootfs, now it just says error getting container, because as it turns out, there's always errors getting containers. I feel like it's a metaphor or something. And the delay in the max number is just kind of completely arbitrary. So it usually, because it's I'm pretty sure it's some sort of race condition, so usually a retry or two, and it's perfectly fine. And as I was mentioning before, the two cases that are kind of a problem for us are the unattended base builds that start, on a timer at, 4 in the morning or whatever. And then also, I still need to go and, in my copious free time, because I work at a startup, so you have infinite free time, right? But in my focus free time, I'm gonna figure out how to make Navigator like change what it reports to Slack, because it was not immediately apparent, and so therefore it was no longer on fire, and I didn't do it immediately, and then you kind of are sitting there going, I wish I had done that immediately, because now it's hard for me to schedule in the time. But now that I've said in public to all you fine people that I'm really going to fix this, I don't want it to be constantly saying that there's a build failure if it's just Docker. So if it's just Docker fail, I kind of want to just change that to Docker fail. So, I mean, I suppose I should go back to that and say, yes, our Jenkins server is called Leroy Jenkins, because, you know, why not? And we do have all of our builds, at least the ones that we're going to care about, like failures, being reported to Slack, because that's my pitch for Slack, is the integrations are really not annoying. And I've used Hipster Chat, so. Okay, so we also actually put these out in prod. And there's not enough room in this talk to go through our whole deploy process, so the short version is, we have a staging process, which is a totally like canary instance sort of thing. You know, the one that you're willing to run New Relic on, because if you're going to run New Relic on everything you're auto-scaling in AWS, you're going to have a bad time. Your accountants are going to have a bad time. Sorry, New Relic, you're awesome. We love you. Basically, take a container. We don't actually take the exact same container from master. What we do is we cut a release branch and have a QA build that builds off a parameterized build from that branch. Then it builds, you know, the QA version, and that's what gets QA tested. We take that same container that's been through QA, tag it in our private, you know, registry, and tag it as staging, and you know, canary it out there and make sure that everything isn't on fire and we're not, you know, there's not tears vomit, and then tag it for production. So again, now the official container that the registries, all the local registries everywhere on all the instances, you know, that may or may not be auto-scaling up and down while this is going on, etc., now believe that the, you know, dub or whatever prod is this new container that was, or sorry, this new container image that was just built. And then we have some fabric, because, you know, orchestration is hard and we have no time, and this is one of the things I'm working on improving. But we have, like, you know, a fab command that goes and pulls instances out of the ELB, just with photo, you know, just pull them out of the ELB and do an upstart, like restart on the service. So dub or whatever it is. We use the same process for everything. So, well, obviously our celery nodes aren't in an ELB, but other than that, we use the same process for everything. And after the upstart is restarted, it restarts, and what it does in the upstart config is a Docker pull, and it pulls whatever its most recent version is. So in this case, its most recent version is, you know, the new prod. Back in the ELB, and you're in business. Okay, so that's our consistent, you know, repeatable deployments, but I promised to talk about local development. So the works on my local thing is, you know, an annoying meme for a reason, especially because for one developer, it works on their local. It might not be the same for the next developer if their local is slightly different. And so you think, all right, that's fine. You don't need Docker for that. That's what Vagrant is for. Very true, very good point. We were using Vagrant, and the problem that we have with Vagrant is that we want the developers to have, we use RDS in Amazon, but we want the developers to have local MySQL. And so we're starting out, we're Vagrant upping and, you know, using a Chef Solo provisioner and letting people build their, you know, local database with all of the fixtures that they need. And I think the final straw was when somebody timed it and realized it was taking 17 minutes for a developer to get the new everything. And so if it takes you 17 minutes to get the new hotness, you're pretty much just gonna not. And so then somebody sits there still developing on, you know, their Vagrant box from 3, 4, 6 weeks ago, and it starts being a huge problem. So making it painless or, you know, less painful. Is anything with computers actually painless? I feel like that's a lie. Making it less painful for the developers to be as up to date as every other developer was a pretty important goal. So we're using boot to Docker. We're almost entirely a Mac, Mac laptops sort of shop, so that works pretty well for us. And we have, we started out with a whole bunch of gnarly bash because that's how every story starts, right? You're in a maze of twisty shell scripts all the same. And the shell scripts would basically just pull the most recent, give them MySQL. I didn't talk about the MySQL base build, but very much like the Django one, we have a MySQL base build that gets built and tested, and then the MySQL container gets tested and tagged for dev. So the developers can basically pull down a database that has all sorts of reasonable looking fake data. That's exactly what they need. And we can actually, because again, they can Docker pull anything they want, they can also pull the current QA. It's like, oh, it's time for QA, and it would be really nice if I can have my database with all the schema changing, all the schema migrations already done, and the, all of the code at that particular moment. We're not a continuous delivery shop currently. We're working on it, but that would be probably I don't miss MongoDB at all, let's just say, but probably the only good thing is not constantly thinking about the schemas. So, yeah. And of course, if a dev wants to try out something new, they want new packages or something that, they're adding new pip requirements, they want to do stuff that's not in the base build. No problem. I mean, they have the Docker files, so they can just do a Docker build if they want locally. But this gives people a really consistent experience because they all have a point of reference. They can say, hey, I have the current QA container. Hey, I have the container with this image ID, and know that they're operating in the exact same environment as the other people. So that's a pretty big win. The local registry stuff is set up a little bit differently for dev. We use the local file system mounts. This is actually why we were on a forked boot to Docker for quite a while, until 1.3, because we really needed people, or wanted at least people, to be able to mount their local file systems in and use whatever local, editor or whatever they wanted. There are people who don't use VI. I know, it's shocking, but it's true. There are people who don't. So just, giving them the opportunity to use whatever kind of local IDE or whatever that they want. And then we pull in, again, that same config.yaml and pull that same public registry image that is, again, the one that we just forked from Docker, just from their official registry image. We need to upgrade that, but I'm kind of I have a GitHub issue to do that. Lots of other issues too. So, yeah. So one of the problems that you run into, and this is again more of the semi-peripherally related AWS stuff, is that S3 cares a lot about your clock sync. So some of you may have noticed that. So if you're trying to do stuff with S3 from a local host, or in this case, inside a virtual machine, that can end up with clock drift, you can't use S3 anymore. So this is an example. This is literally, that was it was off by that much. It was off by hours and hours and hours one day in November, and we're like, okay, this is not good, because it leads to this. It leads to the local registry basically just doesn't work, and you can either SSH in and fix the clock on your virtual machine, or you can just boot to Docker stop, boot to Docker start, which is what the devs had been doing until our head of backend development had just had enough, and he was like, and just threw that in one of the gnarly shell scripts. So I'm not even sure if the latest versions of the registry still even have this problem, just because this is the technical debt you don't even really know if you have or not, because it's not like this is hurting anything. And now that that's in the the MySQL run stuff or whatever, it's being run all the time, every time. Oh no, I know where we put it. I think I stuck that right next to Docker pull. So anytime anyone is doing anything, they're making sure the local clock is synced, because sometimes you just don't have time. Okay, yeah, and I talked a little bit about the forked boot to Docker, which again, the main point of that is being able to mount in your local files. And we also use it to expose logs for the devs, because again, if their Django or Celery or whatever is going to explode, I would much rather have them find out about it, like, I don't know, on their laptop, as opposed to when it's in a shared dev environment, when it's already been merged to master, and then you're having to do all of the, all the reverts, revert. I kind of feel like it's like, I don't know, some sort of Starship Enterprise, revert. One other thing, we've mostly been talking about all of this backend stuff, but one other place Docker has been really useful for us, actually, for developers, is actually front end. So one of the first things I did this summer when I got there, they were like, hi, you're new, we need you to build a container for Angular. And I'm just like, oh, this isn't gonna be good. Because I had containerized some Node.js stuff before, and I don't know, I mean, how many people here actually use Node.js? Okay, so it hasn't been around that long. How could it possibly already have legacy anything? That's what I want to know. How? That's not even possible, right? But apparently there's already legacy Node.js that if you don't keep that, then everything explodes. I don't know. Again, ops person, so I mostly just go to like, our head front end person, and I'm like, why doesn't this work? And apparently there's all sorts of stuff, and these are versions from earlier this summer, so I assume that they are, horribly crafty and ancient by now. They're probably in the legacy package or whatever. But yeah, like Bower, for example, it seems to be, does anyone here use Bower? Okay, so there are some people who are using it. It seems to be intended for like a developer who's actually sitting there interactively. And so if you're not sitting there interactively, it makes all these assumptions about your current working directory and that you must actually be ready to answer some prompts and whatnot. It's just like, really? So yeah, obviously Docker's not going to answer those prompts. So after sorting that stuff out, this worked fine. And what's useful about this, again, is because we don't want to have there be like the one dev who can build this thing, and then we're going to just like, throw the, all of the grunt files or whatever up on S3 and hope everything is super. Like we want this stuff built by Jenkins. And so we have to create a reproducible environment that also the front-end devs can share amongst themselves. So that it's not like, oh, I had my Phantom.js like this, and you have your Bower like that. It's like, no, Docker gives us a lot more consistency there than I think we previously had, especially on the front end. And plus, somebody's laptop doesn't become an essential part of your, build pipeline. You're laughing. It's almost like that's a thing that's happened. Is that a thing that's happened?
No, never.
Never. Never. That would never happen. So it doesn't happen for us now because we containerized it. And one thing that actually one of our devs, Dan Worth, decided to spend a little bit of time hacking on and put this stuff in our hacks repo, which is, pretty much where stuff gets checked in that we haven't quite polished enough for everyone to necessarily be using it, is Fig. And I had actually wanted to spend some time with Fig, and it always, like as an ops person, it makes me super happy when a dev just takes something and runs with it, and then it's like, here, I have something that works. And I'm like, thank you, I love you. This is kind of the use case of, you have this particular project, you want to be able to just bring up all the containers associated with this project at whatever version of the containers you want to specify. I don't have everything in here, but it gives you a little bit of an idea. Oh, all the df home stuff is just an environment variable that we tell people that's where you check out all your GitHub repos. So that's why you'll see this in here. It's kind of nice because instead of having to remember, okay, first I run MySQL pull, and then MySQL run, and then I run Django pull, and then I run Django run console if I want to use it interactively. Like when your mess of bash scripts kind of needs some more bash to drive them, that's when you need to move on to something like this. So I think this is the future that we're moving towards, is using Fig for more of the like the local use, the use case again. And this is also talking a little bit about like, I guess we haven't really talked about the host-only network. I don't know, this isn't a boot to Docker talk, we're talking about the AWS stuff, but there's a lot of gotchas in boot to Docker too. You can find me on the Twitters or whatever, and I'd be happy to talk your ear off about it later. Something else to keep in mind though is, so because we're in Amazon and we're auto-scaling all the time, and our typical instances have a lifespan of, I don't know, maybe 18 hours or so, I think last time I checked. So you kind of think, oh, well, we don't really have to care about any kind of containerized cruft that might lie around. Yeah, but there's always going to be those dev instances or QA instances or some of the other stuff that we Dockerized in a possibly ill-advised fashion. I'll talk about that in a little bit too. Where you end up with old images and stock containers that you don't need around anymore. If somebody logged into a shared dev environment and ran the container themselves just to check it out, and they first ran it without like -it and left it daemonized, and they're like, what? And then they just ran it again and left that daemonized one lying there. So we do actually clean this stuff up. And if you're looking at this and you're thinking, that is terrifying, I can't believe you do that, keep in mind that the default, and it's possibly more terrifying than we should actually be relying on, but Docker's default is you don't delete running containers. So this is literally, this just goes and says, find me all the containers and make it quiet. I just want the container IDs. And just stop them all, just remove them all. It's probably fine. And it is actually fine because it just sees a couple of errors saying can't release running container. Like, all right. So yeah, again, we've been running Docker in production since October 2013. So we're not entirely terrified of living on the edge. And yeah, because we retag images, an image will end up being tagged as none if we've taken its name away and retagged it so that the image no longer is www.prod. It's just the image formerly known as prod. I don't know. I'm from Minnesota, so maybe I have to make a Prince joke there. But anyway, so we do remove the images that we don't need anymore.